Join us as career changers, company leaders, industry experts, and others who have been in your shoes share their stories, insights, and lessons learned to help you find enjoyment through employment in the tech world. I'm Nemo Ashong, and this is the Empjoyment Podcast. Hey, employees, how are you? Nemo here. I'm laughing because I actually just put into play one of the advice from our guest here today, John Fosdick. One of the things he brought up was the aspect of just doing something, writing it all out, and then just throwing it all away and starting again from scratch. That's exactly what happened with this intro here. My previous attempts to just tell you what was on my mind just weren't coming together. So just so you know, I mean, you can already tell just from that it's going to bring a ton of value. And one of the things about John is that John and I have known each other for a number of years. We sang together in Voices of Gotham, the barbershop chorus that I was involved in New York City, as well as working together at AppNexus. So we have a history, and I'm really excited to bring John onto this podcast because he provides a very unique perspective. And even along those lines, he had a goal in mind, and his goal was to become a software engineer. And I'm very happy to say that at the time of this recording, he was just getting ready to transition into working as a full-time engineer throughout as a result of his overall journey. So you'll get a chance to hear his journey, how he started outside of technology in particular, the struggles that he went through, and then the key tenets and underlying principles that he kept on applying to help him get into that role. So with that there, I also want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to build beyond just listening to this episode here and actually put some of this into action and into practice. So I want to invite you to come be a part of the Empjoyment community. In this community, you'll have the chance to get exclusive opportunities and advanced access of some of the behind the scene things that are happening within Empjoyment, as well as the opportunity to drive the direction of where Empjoyment goes in the future. And on top of that, I think probably the biggest benefit of it all is that you get a chance to interact with me, Nemo, and past guests and others just like you who are taking action now to move themselves forward on their journey to find enjoyment through employment. Right? We're an action-oriented group of people, and you get a chance to be around that. At the very least, you're going to make sure that you can get some additional emails from me helping you move forward in your journey. So come be a part of the Empjoyment community. You can go to empjoyment.com/community or just type in Empjoyment to 33444 on your cell phone. So the number is 33444 and just type the word Empjoyment, EMPJOYMENT, and you'll get the information as to how to become a part of the Empjoyment community. So with that there, we'll let things go on, and here is today's episode with John Fosdick. Hello. Welcome to the thank you so much, John. This is good. You all are in for a treat there, employees, because today on the Empjoyment Podcast, where we are focused on helping people just like you find enjoyment through employment, we have John Fosdick, who is an engineering quality analyst for AppNexus Incorporated. John, that's super official, but it is so good to have you on the show.
Thanks for including the incorporated. I'm glad you took me literally there.
Yes, you know what? I think it's only appropriate if that's what you say we should say. You know, I want to make sure that I'm representing you as you like to be represented.
Yeah.
So employees, just so you know, I'm really excited for today's call. John and I actually go back quite a bit here. We both worked for AppNexus, which I'll call it from now on, and in New York City. And I actually got a chance to meet John both through AppNexus and through the barbershop chorus that we sing with called Voices of Gotham. And what was really cool about that, just a quick side note for me, is that the cool thing is that in interacting with John, the person that he is on the risers, the singing risers, is the same person he is when it comes to work. And I think that's something that is something I really appreciate about you, John, in particular, and also appreciate about our experiences, and probably why we both found the same type of group to sing in and the same type of organization to work at, because it really just felt like, I don't know if I can say anything else, but just like an authentic version of ourselves in both situations. So it's really been a great honor to have you on the show.
No, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a really awesome time here. And I'm excited to explore how you found enjoyment today. But before we get into all of that, why don't we give employees a chance to get to know you a little bit more personally? Would you mind sharing your life, love, work, and passion?
Yeah, sure. So, what is there to know about me? I am 25 years old. I'm working for AppNexus, as you said, working as an engineering quality analyst, which at a high level means that I write tests for AppNexus code to make sure that anything that ends up getting shipped to our clients is something that's actually of a quality product and ready to go for them. Um, I graduated from Haverford College in 2013 with a mathematics major and studied like a little bit of computer science while I was doing that, but never was like explicitly any kind of computer science major or anything like that. And since then, I mean, my career has really been gearing me up towards what I ultimately wanted to do after I graduated college, which was be a software engineer. Um, and that path took me through a couple of roles, including the current one. I was a IT person for a television networking company for a while before I ended up like scoring this role at AppNexus. And hopefully within the next couple of weeks, actually, I'll be moving over to an actual engineering role, which is really cool because that's kind of what I've been working to achieve for a number of years now.
Congratulations on that, John. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's quite exciting.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm doing a little dance in my chair here. Y'all can't see this, but I like to dance with my shoulders, and I also like to dance at my desk. So it's only appropriate.
yeah. Oh yeah. I've been doing a little happy dance internally for a couple of weeks now. So
That's really exciting. So can I ask you, like, you're reaching your goal here. Like, why was becoming an engineer like your goal? Like, what was it about it, or what is it about it that makes you so excited to do that type of work?
So, a couple of things, really, right? Like, I think, like something that's important about me is that I've always found myself to be someone who enjoys solving problems, especially ones that require some level of like detail-oriented work. Which is why, so in college, I mentioned I was a math major, and there was never really anything like any passion for mathematics in and of itself that drove me towards doing that, right? I studied and ultimately got a math major because the kinds of things that I like to do led me into those kinds of courses. Um, Things where I get presented some kind of technical problem, and it's like you need to go through step by step and be very organized and clear about your step taking and figure out a solution to some problem that's affecting something, right? Um, so in the process of studying for this degree, there were a couple of classes that happened to have me need to learn some programming, and I found I found programming just to be a really great vehicle for sort of this like problem solving desire that I've always like enjoyed solving, right? It's an exercise where you literally are presented a problem and then you need to go write up some actual technical organized solution that will then actually go do the thing for you in some automated fashion. I find that really satisfying for whatever reason. And I knew after I graduated with this degree and had taken these classes, I was like, you know what? I mean, I'm looking at the scope of things that I could do in this world, and applying this like programming thing just seems like a great way of finding that satisfaction, right? It seemed to me the clear path. Not that I really knew how to get there at the time, but I knew in my head, back in my head somewhere, that was the thing that I wanted.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's so cool. It's actually sparking up something in me here because I haven't really thought about programming in that way as like, a methodical, organized approach to problem solving. But that's exactly what it is it not?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, when I was a kid, one of my favorite activities was like jigsaw puzzles, actually. And like sort of that exercise of like, you have the picture of what the world needs to be at some end state when you finish this puzzle, but all you dump out is this huge pile of pieces that are all disorganized. I was the kind of kid that would like sort everything out by patterns and colors before they started, and then like you got to do the edge first and make sure you find the corners and fill it in some organized fashion. that's that kind of like mental exercise that you do when you're just like putting that picture together is how I imagine it is to like write a piece of code that achieves some goal. And I find that same joy in the exercise. So.
Wow. Thank you. You just given me this like great view of things. Like, if you don't mind, I'm going to add the jigsaw puzzle to my overall toolkit when I'm approaching a problem. Like, I know what the end thing needs to look like, and I have all the pieces in front of me. Now how do I get it from the mess that's there to something that's going to be the picture that I want. And I'm glad that you found that through programming. I'd love to, I'm looking forward to exploring your full journey here and some of the things that you found that help you kind of bridge the gap in each of those times. But before we do that, I'd love to get a chance to talk through something to help frame the conversation here. And really with that, what I'm getting at is how you maybe frame your life or one of your outlooks on life, which is in this case, a form of a success quote or some kind of mantra that, you really find has been instrumental in the way that you have found success. Would you mind sharing a quote or mantra with us to help us get started?
Yeah, sure. So this is a funny one. This will be a funny one for you because it's actually a quote that I found on the wall at AppNexus when I was AppNexus. The way that they decorate is they have all these like inspirational quotes all over the walls in various places. And I walked by this one a couple of months ago, and it's one of those things that I've walked by a million times, but this is the first time that I'd actually like happened to read it, and I was like, actually really like that. The quote is, "Leap and the net will appear." Leap and the net will appear. And I love it because it's so short and sweet and makes such like a great point. It's something that sort of comes up in my sort of everyday life while I'm working. And it's something that I literally think about those specific words several times a day. There's just so many opportunities during your career or during a given workday where it's like the only thing that's preventing you from achieving even like some daily task is the fact that you're like afraid to do it. And I feel that way a lot of times as I'm sort of transitioning into this software developer role. I'm going to start doing this new kind of work. I am going to finally start like doing work that's something I've been like arguing my own proficiency at for a while with the people that are responsible for transitioning me into the role. And I'm starting to do the work now. And like, there's this degree of like self-consciousness, like, oh, like I've advocated for myself so hard to be an engineer and now I'm doing this engineering work. Like, is it going to be bad? Are people not going to like it or think that I'm like not doing a good job? And like literally that's a thing that holds me back in my day-to-day work life right now. And it's always that little think back to that quote that like gets me to be like, all right, you know what, just submit this code review and like whatever people say about it, and then I'll learn from that and do better. But I find myself leaping a lot throughout the day, and I have to like actually tell myself to go ahead and do that. But it's cool that quote is up there on the wall near my desk because it's a useful little reminder.
Absolutely. I think like I know exactly the quote that you're talking about. I remember when it hit me too. I was like, oh yeah.
It's actually funny because on the AppNexus wall, it's actually misattributed.
Oh really?
It's Leap and the Net Will Appear attributed to Julia Cameron. I don't know who Julia Cameron is, but she was quoting John Burroughs when she said it.
Look at that. All right. So at least on the Enjoyment podcast, we can get it right, you know?
Yep. Well, yeah, I don't want to come out here and not cite my sources, you know? I wanted to make sure I had it right.
I fully appreciate it. I think employees also appreciate it too. Let's make sure that it's right there. You know, so John, like, I mean, you really hit on a couple just like really deep elements, and like I want to make sure that we explore that here in the conversation. So, I mean, you know, Leap in the Net Will Appear, and you were talking about this here most recently through your leap from where you have been as an engineering quality analyst to, you know, actually as a software developer. And I'm trying to think through what would be helpful here would be to get an understanding of like maybe a story or a time where maybe you can walk us through like how you actually use this principle to go ahead and just actually make this come together. So was there like a project or something where you can give us a little bit of an understanding as to how this came into play for you at work?
Sure. I mean, so I recently did. It's hard to like give context on like what a particular project that I work on without like explaining a whole bunch of other stuff as as like as like preliminary context. But I'll do my best. So I was working on this project. So we have this concept called refactoring in programming, where you need to take some body of work that's already done and is maybe already functional too, but it's really hard to maintain because it was maybe badly written or it had multiple contributors or something. It basically just needs to be like taken and just rewritten from the ground up. I had a professor in college, actually. It was for a writing seminar, who always would tell me that when you're writing an essay, the best way to write it is to write it one time and then just like burn it and throw it away and write it again. That like something about the exercise of like doing it first in some way that's maybe disorganized or wrong or whatever, and then just completely forgetting about it and rewriting it from scratch. Like that's like the best way to do stuff. And it's true in writing and it's also true in programming. But for this particular project, it was take this giant, really sloppy body of code and refactor it into several different pieces, make it easier to read, and importantly, make it way faster. And it was sort of a daunting project because it would be basically my first major contribution to the code base that my team works on. And because I'm like rewriting the whole, so when you're training to be an engineer, you're normally just like fixing small bugs in other work or whatever. So like maybe there's like a line or two sporadically throughout the code base that's yours and the rest is like owned by everybody else. This will be the first time that I had this huge body of work that was like just mine. There's a lot of sort of self-consciousness that comes with that, being like anytime that some problem happens that traces back to this file, it's definitively my fault. But it was an important challenge for me to take on because it was important to submit one giant body of work to leverage myself as, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this development thing and you should make me an engineer, right? So I think taking on the project itself was already a leap where I hoped a net would appear, because even just volunteering for such a big project, even objectively from a standpoint of maybe this is something I already know how to do, would be a big leap, but it's definitely a leap because it's something that I'm learning how to do, right? But there are also many like tiny day-to-day leaps that need to be happening in order to like make this work, because this is my first time touching this area of the code base, which meant that I had to ask a lot of questions to figure out how does this thing work, what's the context in which it runs and stuff like that, right? And for me, that's like a million tiny leaps, because I'm always like, oh, if I ask this person this question, am I coming off as someone who doesn't know what they're doing and not qualified to like do the thing that I want to do? Or is this a legitimate thing that I should be asking? And, there's always that weird sort of song and dance you have to do when you're like training for a new thing of just being confident that you're supposed to not know what you're doing by virtue of the fact that you're in training. And that's always been like a hard thing for me. So yeah.
Yeah, John, I think like that last line there, like it was interesting. You mentioned confidence, and it was a really cool spin that you just put on this. And now it's part of this reason why I'm sure you're just so successful there, where you're able to just like find the part of it that really resonates. And you're like, yes, I have to be confident, but I have to be confident in the fact that I'm not supposed to know.
Exactly. It's the trick with the training for a new thing, right? You're maybe new on a brand new team, and the expectation is that you don't know how anything works, and you want to prove yourself by proving that you know how things work. It's like this cognitive dissonance that's so hard to get over as a newbie in some situation. But
but it's real, and I appreciate you giving us here. There's a lot that we can like kind of grasp onto when we're trying to make that move there. So I mean, we have this really cool flip on what confidence is, right, and how to like have confidence in the moment, and then we also have just the overall mantra of leaping and the net will appear, by John Burroughs, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
All
right.
right, cool. Here we go. Before we jump on to the rest of the conversation, you mentioned a few things here that I think would be helpful to clarify. So you mentioned code base and also code review.
Oh, sure.
Would you mind just explaining what both of those things are?
Yeah, sure. So a code base is literally just your team's entire body of work. All of the scripts, all the functions, all the programs that are your team is writing and maintaining to do that team's job. In my case, the team's job is go test all the other applications at AppNexus, right? We have to maintain some body of actual physical code files somewhere in order to achieve that goal. And that's what we call the code base. You can even just think of it as just like a regular directory on your computer. You have a folder where you keep a bunch of files. For us, we have a repository where we keep a bunch of code. It's pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. And then you said submitting something for a code review. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So the way that the engineering process works is I'm assigned some task. I go and I write some code that does that task, and then but I only have sort of like some sort of working copy of it, right? Like no one else has this file that I'm working on because I'm just kind of working on it myself, testing it myself, getting it ready for what we call production, or the stage where people are actually able to like use the thing that you are have produced. That step of like getting something from working copy to production requires, at least on my team, we have this standard of 3 other developers have to actually read what your file, like what you've written up, and they can leave feedback. They can ask, hey, is this function actually working the way you think it does, or does it need to be rewritten this way? Or there's lots of comments that another developer might leave that says this thing needs improvement before it's actually ready to go, ready for you to submit this work. And that's, for me, it always feels like you're like very exposed, right? It's like sort of like being graded for an exam, right? Where you say, hey, this is my best effort at answering these questions. And then your professor or whatever comes back with like, oh, here's your feedback, and here's what I grade you and how well you did or whatever. But code review has this different context of like, okay, but the people who are doing the grading are like your peers, they're just like maybe like your friends that you hang out with after work or whatever, or like people that you see every day, that are like supposedly like on the same level as you because they're just like your fellow engineers. But there's this weird process of like evaluation and like grading and how well did you do doing this project, that I find personally to be a leap to submit that thing. I want to like make sure I can like go back and make sure it's like totally perfect and ready to go before anyone else sees it.
Yeah. So how do you like, and John, I promise you, I do want to go back to the beginning of your journey here, but you're talking on some things that are just like really, I don't know. I'm putting myself in your shoes. I'm like, man, this would be pretty difficult. So like, how do you get over that aspect of the perfection? And it might just be that leaping portion, but
yeah,
I'm a perfectionist, and it holds me back so much. And I can see, I'll be curious as to how you continue to make progress there.
Yeah, well, my answer is maybe helpful and maybe not, but you get over it by getting over it. Like, it's part of the job, and that's the way that the team operates. And to prove yourself as an efficient member of the team, you have to prove that you're not held back by that kind of self-consciousness, right? It goes back to this desire of like, I want to paint this portrait of me being like a really effective member of this team by pretending that I'm like efficient all the time. That's at least like a thing that might hold you back when you're sort of like training for a new role, right? I want to appear as if I'm good at this thing, even though I'm objectively not good at it yet, right? Same thing applies to like when you're submitting, well, in my case, the thing that I'm self-conscious about submitting things for peer feedback, which is that in order to leverage myself as an effective developer, I have to show that I can like put things up for code review quickly and respond to feedback quickly and iterate in a fast manner, right? To show that I can deliver on my work. And if I'm sitting there just like being a perfectionist and scrutinizing and being afraid to do that, that's gonna ultimately hurt me, right? It's going to show that like it takes me a long time to do things because I'm just like too nervous about putting them up for review or whatever. And it's actually counterproductive. So
yeah, John, that's like, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, it's like, it's almost like being the perfection comes in being a little bit imperfect, and you're actually working on the things that matter and that skill and that muscle, as opposed to what might appear to be matter, which is the quote unquote being right. That's not it. That's not being perfect. Actually, that's not. It's actually the first thing of imperfection.
Yeah, and actually, a thing that my boss told me that's like, because I've talked to him about this before. And the thing that he said that was really helpful was like, there's, because you're new, there's no amount of perfect that you can get it that's going to actually be perfect before it's like ready for review, because you legitimately don't know how to make it perfect. That's the whole point of you being an entry-level engineer. Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to know what the perfect version of this thing is. You can only have like sort of your best crack at it. And that really resonated with me, because I told him in this meeting, like, the reason that I like feel so held back when I'm posting these things is because I want them to be ready without you guys having to tell me how to make it ready. And that's counterintuitive to being a new engineer on a team.
Wow, John, I really appreciate this here. And I think it's something that whether or not someone is trying to become an engineer or is stepping into product support or is getting into product management or a new role on legal or human resources or just entering tech in general, like there's the expectation that you don't know, and
yes,
that's okay. That is totally okay. And I feel that there's a lot of power in this here. And I appreciate you, John, really, honestly, just being so open with this experience here and just talking so openly about this, because this is this kind of stuff that is in the back of all of our minds. We can learn the skills, but like whether or not we can like shut the voice in our head that's saying it's not good enough, like if we don't put that out there, I think that we're never going to be able to take that step forward. So thank you for being so open with that there. So John, we talked a little bit here. I'd love to kind of understand like your first transition. You had said that you were working in IT at a TV company, and then you got into testing quality at AppNexus. Can you talk a little bit about like that transition and how you made that move from media TV to technology? Yeah,
sure. So I guess the real starting point is like sort of this brief, well, objectively brief, but it felt like an eternity, 4-month period after college where I was just unemployed, living in New York City, knowing that I wanted to be a software developer, but having no like real plan of like how to get there. I just, like I said, I graduated with this idea in the back of my head that like, oh, I want to be an engineer because the work is fun. But I had no experience, and I certainly didn't have a computer science degree. I just had a couple of classes that I happened to learn some random programming things from that I enjoyed. So I'm in this position after college of I'm like, okay, well, I want to be an engineer, so I'm going to apply for some engineering roles and see if I can get them. And 4 months go by of not getting an engineering role. Got a few interviews or whatever, but wasn't really progressing very well. It really was on the weakness of my resume that like I had no evidence to suggest that I was a good programmer other than I liked it, and I didn't have an internship or anything under my belt that would like can help me out there. So I started to get really worried actually that this was an idea that wasn't going to pan out. And my girlfriend at the time actually was the one who was like, well, maybe you need to break this down into smaller, more manageable chunks, right? Maybe you aren't, she was like, sorry to say this, but maybe you're not ready to be an engineer. And I'm like, all right, well, the evidence suggests that you're right. So, how do I attack this problem? She's like, well, what are you good at? Like, what do you, besides the fact that you enjoy doing this work, like, what are you good at that you're qualified to do now? And how do you leverage that towards getting towards like your ultimate goal of engineer? And I think that like reframe was a really important step because it ended up in me getting a job, first of all. But second of all, I think it was actually the correct move. So what I decided I was good at was like, well, I do know computers to some capacity. If I don't know how to program them totally effectively yet, I at least know how they work. And I like working with other people. So I ended up getting this job as an IT person, which is doing like first level IT support is not really on the traditional career path towards like becoming a software engineer, but it leveraged my skills in a way that I could like do my job effectively day to day because I was good at it, and find opportunities to train myself to become an engineer. What I mean by that is like being an engineer is about taking processes and like automating them in some way. And what was cool about the IT job was there were opportunities for me to be like, hey, this manual process that I do to upgrade all these computers every day is a really kind of a pain. So what if I just write a script that does it for me? And sort of that process of gaining software engineering experience through something that was not a software engineering job, I think is like what really led me towards ultimately scoring this analyst role. And continuing to have that mindset through this analyst role is what is now propelling me towards becoming an engineer. So with regards to the analyst role, so I worked as the IT person for about a year and a half and got the analyst role on a recommendation from someone that went to my college that ended up working at AppNexus, who worked on this engineering quality team. And she said it was great. It's a great opportunity for budding developers because you get to work with people that are software developers and like see the problems they confront every day and see what kind of code they're putting out, and have some participation in the software development process. But like at the end of the day, you're just doing testing, which means that you're not actually like writing new code. You're just writing scripts basically that go and test other people's stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, that's like a step in the right direction, and kind of leverage myself that way in interviews for this analyst job. And they're like, that's great. We have this person who's interested in being an engineer, appreciates the engineering process, and has like some background of like working with people and writing scripts from his IT job. And that pretty much landed me, I think, pretty comfortably back here as an analyst, where I ended up working for about 2 years. So that's it's kind of my little post-college journey.
Nice. And John, would you mind me asking just how long that journey lasted altogether from, the 4 months, like just to kind of give us a frame of time?
Yeah, sure. So graduated in 2013, and kind of like hung out at my college for a summer before I moved to New York. So I moved to New York that September of 2013. Got my first job as an IT person in January of 2014. And then when did I transition to analyst? It would have been a year and a half later. So it would have been mid 2015 that I started at Nexus.
Okay.
So I've been working here ever since.
Nice. Thank you for that. And I think one of the things there that I'm hoping to find out is just how long the journey took you overall since like you made that decision. And some things that were kind of coming out to me as I was listening to this here was firstly the quote that there was no evidence to suggest that you were a good developer on your resume. I think that's I think that is such a key concept. And when I get a chance to coach people in their careers, both for tech careers and just in general, I think that is one of the key aspects there that that people are missing, right? Where almost like they're almost looking to the employer to make the leap versus looking at themselves to make the leap. And I think that there's one of the things that I really appreciated about that statement in particular. And I'm going to just, if you don't mind, I'm going to keep that and add that again to my toolkit. But
go for it.
It wasn't that you didn't say like I didn't have coding background, and so my resume wasn't there. Right. What you said is that there was no evidence to suggest that you were a good developer. And I think that like that just leaves so much open there. And what I love about your story is that like all throughout from that moment onward, you just kept building evidence. You're like, oh, wait, here goes a clue. Here goes another clue. And what it felt to me as you were breaking this down and taking on these different roles is that you decided in some way, shape or form that you were going to be an engineer in every role that you did. It just may not have been for the full, 40 plus hours of the work week, but you're going to find a way to get to the underlying core portion of what you believed an engineer was, which was taking processes and automating them and finding different opportunities in each of your roles to put on your software engineering hat. Is that is that fair of me to say?
Oh, that's absolutely fair of you to say. That was the strategy the whole time. I mean, once I arrived at that point where I was like, you know what, I just don't think I have the experience yet to provably get this job right off the gate. Like, I got to find other ways to prove that I am capable of doing it.
Yeah, no, and employees, I hope you're getting this here. Like, find other ways to prove it. That, like, build that evidence to suggest. John got another job and he found a different sliver of ways to do it. Then he took on another role and gave him even more opportunity. If you don't have that same type of opportunity, what can you do in your job right now to start showing those types of experiences? What types of nonprofit or just side projects can you take on to start building that evidence there? Because, there, at the end of the day, it's the experience. Sometimes it can be paid and it can be given from an organization, or it could be just you just doing something. And I feel like, John, you found a great way to do it and to build so many other skills along the way to make it successful. So thank you for that, John. Yeah. John, you've been really great about talking through some of the things that were holding you back. So typically I like to find out about a roadblock that you experienced on your journey, but you've been pretty upfront about that. I just wanted to see, do you have any one in particular that you would really want to walk through with us here? Otherwise, we can move on. I can find a little bit more about some things that are making you're really proud about.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me what do I think of as the number one roadblock on my journey, it is that experience of having to completely get stuck and get nowhere applying for jobs the first time and have to reframe the entire problem. I mean, that was probably the most pivotal moment of my career so far, and definitely the hardest roadblock that I've run into. It's very stressful not being able to get a job, especially when you're living in the most expensive city in the country. It's hard, and it's hard to, in sort of panic mode like that, where you're like, I need to get a job. It's hard to think rationally and try and re-strategize when you're also just at least for me, I felt like I was scrambling at all times to get a job. And really the ultimate turnaround for me was reframing the problem and getting that IT job. And, I sat down on my desk the first day at that IT place being like, you know what, this is really not what I want to do long-term. I don't as objectively enjoy this work, but you know what, I'm good at it. And there are going to be opportunities for me here to prove myself in another venue, so.
That's awesome. And I'm hearing you say this, reframe the problem. I think, you also seem to be doing that when it comes to the code review and all that other stuff where you're like, wait a minute, perfection is I need to be making sure I'm building the right skill, and the right skill is getting used to getting people to review and be so you reframe that as well. So, John, I'm picking that up as a good skill set of yours here. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
So let's go ahead and flip things around now. Tell us about tell us about a project that you're really proud of, that you did it, you accomplished it, and at least to you was incredibly impactful. Can you tell us about a time in your career where you had that kind of moment?
Yeah. So I love that you took my comment about reframing and then you reframed the interview. That's great.
That's what we do here.
Anyway, yeah. So I think so my favorite projects in general that I've been working on as an analyst are opportunities that I've been given to utilize engineering skills in a way that directly impacts my fellow analysts, right? So that means building tools that have some direct benefit for my peers on my same team. Something about that just immediate impact feels really really satisfying for me. And those have been my favorite moments in my career, really.
So can you talk about like a potential problem that like when someone on your team was facing, and just generally how the tool went about helping them?
Yeah, sure. So without diving too deep into the specifics, there was a workflow on my team which required a lot of manual labor. You had to, like, I don't know how to describe this in general terms. It can be hard to talk about engineering problems in a way that's like accessible.
Appreciate you trying, my friend.
Yeah, sure. But let's just say there's this component of the analyst's daily workflow for submitting tests that required a lot of manual labor. You had to go to this URL and click, like, fill in these fields and click this button, and then you had to wait, and maybe that would fail, maybe that would pass. If it failed, you had to like retry it a bunch of times until it finally worked. And then once that happened, you had to like go file a ticket in this queue, and then you had to go like kick off this other job. It was this whole process of like fill in a bunch of fields, push a button, wait a little bit, maybe retry it a bunch of times, and then once that finally works, then it's just a huge waste of time, right? You're basically spending hours of your day supervising these like jobs that you're kicking off when really you could just be like doing literally anything else, and that's a better use of your time. So I sort of enumerated this as a huge problem for the analysts, and my boss was like, well, you've been like getting some programming chops from other small tasks we've been giving you. Why don't you come up with an automated solution for this? Which is, hey, a great job thinking like an engineering manager. But he was right. Like that was like probably the best way to attack the problem. And it was this really satisfying feeling of I'm finally in this seat where I am actually the most qualified person to work on this, because I am like I'm someone who's been directly impacted by it, and I know what like an elegant solution for it would be. And basically what that really means is writing like a really big script that's supposed to go do all of that retrying and launch this job and check this thing and file this ticket and blah, 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 blah. But it ends up being, it basically took that problem for analysts and changed it into fill out like 3 fields and push a button and then come back to me in like 4 hours and I'll have your successful result for you. And it saved the team a lot of pain, and I could see that like analysts were very appreciative that we like finally had this workflow. And it also like means that because analysts are not spending so much time doing all this manual manipulation, we can like test more things. So like it had impact external to my team too. But really for me, it was just like seeing this frustrating endeavor that like my fellow teammates had to keep going through, and knowing that like, hey, I like took that problem out of your life. And that's like a thing that, that brings me a lot of like personal joy. So.
Wow, John, this is like literally, I'm smiling over here because I'm like, you saw the jigsaw puzzle, you saw the end, and you're like, how do I solve this problem here? You're like yeah. You want to solve problems through like automated solutions. This is legitimately what you started this whole conversation out saying, like, that's the most satisfying thing in the world to you. So
and it's like all the pieces are there in front of you. You just gotta sort them all and then put them in the right order and connect them. And like that's like what engineering really is at the end of the day. Why the puzzle analogy is really nice.
It works so well. And I think it's great that you really drive it home through how you go about doing things. So talk about driving things home. We're just about the end of the conversation. I want to be respectful of your time here, but I would love to give employees just an opportunity to hear from you. Like, what's one of the things that has you currently excited in your professional journey right now?
Beyond like the obvious benefit of like, hey, I think I'm getting promoted soon. No, it's really, so there's this concept in engineering called test-driven development. It means so the basics of it is normally when you attack a problem and you want to like engineer a solution to it, you just kind of sit down at your computer terminal and you write some code, and then maybe you like run it a few times to see where all the problems are, and then you go fix it, blah, 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 blah. And then maybe when you're done with that, you'll then go write like a suite of tests that like actually run your code and then make sure that the expected inputs make the expected outputs, and whatever. Like you end up with this like test suite at the end of the day that like makes sure that the thing that you just spent all this time writing works. That's sort of the normal development process. But test-driven development is sort of taking the problem and reversing it. It's saying, I'm going to write a bunch of tests first, and then I'll write code that makes those tests pass. It's sort of like a safer way to engineer things, because you're sort of solving problems that your tests churn up like as you go. But it also guarantees that you actually write the test in the first place. A lot of engineers will not bother with the test suite at the end of the day because they already built the thing that works, and who wants to spend more time writing tests when you've already like solved the problem? You can ship your code and go do something else. I think working on an analyst team, on an engineering quality team, really instilled in me the value of like good testing, because I get to see on a day-to-day basis all the complications that arise when you like don't test your code well, because we find bugs and we escalate them back to engineers. But I'm excited to like take sort of the skills that I've gained through being an analyst and like apply them in a new lens, really, right? It's like, I know what it takes to write good tests because I've just been doing that for 2 years as an analyst. Now, why not just keep writing good tests while I'm doing this other role of being an engineer? And I don't know, that's, you know, you never like to feel like the thing that you're leaving behind is something that you're like completely leaving behind. After, 2 years of like working in some career path, it's nice to be able to like take that experience and leverage it in a new way. And that for me is like the way that I'm hanging on to that part of my job that's going to probably go away soon, right? I'm no longer explicitly responsible for writing tests for other developers. I'm just going to be a developer, and why not just write tests for myself the way that I would normally for an external person?
It sounds like, John, like what you have here is another thing to be able to leverage to help you be successful in this role, and help you even like just take that leap even quicker, because you have things in place to help you out there. So test-driven development, it's a new concept to me. So I'm excited that you exposed me to it, and also the rest of the employees out here. So, John, like we're coming to the end here. I just want to like open up things for you here to see, like, do you have any questions for me? And is there anything else that you'd like to leave employees with, just like in terms of like a closing thought?
No, I think the closing thought for me is like, I keep tying everything back to leaping, but it's just it can be so stressful and so difficult to sort of make a career change. Especially one that like involves you doing a whole new kind of work that maybe you don't have like the background experience to justify, but you just know that there's this thing that you really want to do, and it's like out there somewhere. You just need to find a way to go achieve it. And I think, the best way to do it is really just that reframing thing that we talked about before, right? Just like figure out, what are my skills? What are my demonstrable skills? What is my experience from before give me to leverage in a new position, and how do I make small achievable steps towards the thing that's ultimately my goal? Taking that strategy like eased this gigantic weight off my life that I was feeling when I was feeling so daunted by wanting this engineering role and not being able to get it when I first graduated. But like don't be afraid to make career choices that you never envisioned for yourself. I never envisioned myself being an IT support person, and then there I was doing it for a year and a half. But always be planning ahead and strategizing and seeing what can I do next that gets me one step closer to the thing that I ultimately want.
Well, thank you for that, John. That's a great way to end this conversation. You've just been so awesome and just so kind with your time and so generous with that time and your experiences. You came here, you're authentic, and you talked about the real stuff here. You talked about the stuff that, people are in their goal of trying to be perfect often leave off. Like, this is the real stuff that you really have to work through. So I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you. I am excited for what comes next for you. And I'm just very grateful that you took the time to share your story here with Employees. So thank you so much, John. We'll go ahead and end this here, and we'll go off and have a great day.
All right. Thanks. I was happy to do this, and glad to get here and sit here and talk about myself for a while.
Added benefit, right?
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
All right. So there you have it, employees. What an awesome episode with John here. And I mean, there were just so many valuable additions through there. We're walking through this idea of leaping and then having a net appear, right? And writing it out once and then throwing it completely out. Like, that's exactly what happened at the beginning of this episode. And just the way that John was able to continuously reframe his current situation to get him into a position of taking action and moving forward. The idea of having confidence and being confident in the fact that right now you're not supposed to know the answers, or reframing the problem of getting a job and getting stuck in terms of how does he go about doing this, and what is the actual approach that he should be taking, and just reframing that problem in his mind. And I also think, just with all that there was also that really great gem about him having no evidence to suggest that he was a good developer on his resume. So I like to end each of these with a call to action for each of you, which actually means do something. So here goes your action here. What does your resume suggest? What evidence is on your resume that suggests that you will be the right fit for the job that you want in tech, or for a job in tech in general? Think about one thing. I'd love for you to come onto the employment community and share with us and let us know what that one thing is for you. And if you don't have that one thing, please take the time right now to think about it and then update your resume. Commit sometime this week to update your resume with what that is, or to commit to figuring out a plan to start building those actions, because it's just experience and it doesn't need to be paid for you to get it. Don't wait for someone to tell you it's okay to do something before you make it come to life. All right. So we'll leave it at that. We'll see you in the enjoyment community. You can get there by going to employment.com/community, or just type in the word employment to 33444 if you're in the US. All right. Well, looking forward to what comes next. Go off and have a wonderful day full of enjoyment. Take care.